Can't hear you,
Got the
Stacy.
whole
There you go.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
we got the whole crew in the house. Stacy Blackwood, Jake Thomas, and Joe Will. Guys, how y'all doing?
Man, I'm great. I'm glad to be back, and Joe, glad to have you back too. It's been a while. I know you started a new job and had some other things going on, so glad you could join us again, brother.
Yeah, I'm happy to be with you guys again. We were talking about before we went live here how nice it is to kind of we're getting closer and closer to football season beginning. And this off season, I don't know why. Maybe it's because the way the season ended kind of left a bad taste in everyone's mouth. I feel like this off season has been like twice as long as it usually is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. And like you said, now we're under 90 days from kickoff, so it'll be here before we know it. And they'll be starting practice, in what, probably 6 weeks? No, probably about 8 weeks now. And media days will be next month, so it'll be here before we know it. And there's going to be a lot to discuss between now and then. Of course, the biggest news or the biggest story is going to be the quarterback battle, but we're not here to talk about that today. We're going to be looking at 247 Sports article where they kind of projected the 2024 SEC schedule, since the SEC has decided to remain with an 8-game schedule in conference, with Oklahoma and Texas making the move over. So we're going to be looking at what their projections are for Alabama for a schedule in 2024, and kind of what we like, what we don't like, or just our thoughts in general on the schedule. But before we do that, you know the drill. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. If you're watching, make sure you jump in the chat and let us know your thoughts on Alabama football in general, the schedule, just your opinion on the Crimson Tide heading into the 2023 season and beyond. But with that, I'm going to do my best to share the screen here so we can kind of look at the proposed schedule from 247 Sports. And of course, this is not set in stone. This is not from the SEC. This is just 247 Sports' opinion on the matter. And I just thought it was really interesting because with an 8-game schedule, it's certainly going to be different this year. And or not this year, in 2024. So especially with Oklahoma and Texas joining the fold. So as you look at Alabama's proposed opponents for 2024, Jake, I'll start with you. What sticks out to you the most?
Man, those away games are going to be electric, pretty much. I mean, at Oklahoma, at Georgia, at Tennessee. Ooh, that's a tough calling card. And I mean, Arkansas too. It's a tough place to play. But man, those three big boys right there, boy, that's going to challenge the boys when they go there. So that's the biggest thing that pops off to me.
Yeah, we already got some folks in the chat. Cassidy, no, I do not have earrings. They're called earbuds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I saw those on like the TikTok, and I was like, it looks like an alien or something.
I may have to lose them.
Yeah.
We're gonna bully you into
Yeah.
some other earphones.
Our buddy Stephen Willis from Locked On Ole Miss is in the show. Thank you, Steve, for tuning in. Yeah, the road games to me is obviously what sticks out the most. But does that not look like a fun season of SEC football right there?
Absolutely.
I mean, you talk about a murderer's row. I mean, that road schedule, like you mentioned, Jake, is just ridiculous. Joe,
Yeah.
what are you thinking about this schedule?
I love it. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is iron sharpens iron. The season, the COVID season where we had to play an all SEC schedule was one of our better seasons. Obviously, we came out on top and won the national championship. But I think, and this is something, I mean, Saban's been preaching for, a harder schedule. Everybody just assumes that in the SEC that we want to play these cupcake teams. You've got a couple hard games, and then you've got, a cupcake game before the Iron Bowl. But I think the conference as a whole, I want all these teams to be as good as they can be. I don't want teams to suck. I want Alabama to play the best teams, because in the years that we've kind of skated through the SEC and not had much of a challenge, I think it's been tough when you get to the playoffs to kind of wake up and get that energy. I mean, it's still an Alabama Nick Saban team, so that they're going to bring their A-day each week and they're not going to slack off. But I think the harder opponents we play, the better off we are. in the long run and preparation for the playoffs and hopefully national championship.
Mhm.
Yeah, and just to kind of remind everyone, you see those road games there. Alabama's also scheduled to be on the road at Wisconsin in 2024.
Good gosh. Mm, that's
What
You
wild.
talk
I
that
wonder
might
when
be.
that game is, because if it's a
I
snowy
think
game or something.
It's September 14th, so it's like the
Okay.
second week of the season or third week, depending on when the season starts next year. But that might be the toughest roads if this happened to be Alabama's schedule next year with a road game in non-conference at Wisconsin. That might be the toughest road schedule in the history of college football.
That is wild. I thought this year's road schedule was pretty tough, but this
Yeah,
one
and
takes the cake for
2022 was
sure.
no joke for Alabama. I mean, I think people often forget that too. I mean, you talk about road games at Tennessee, LSU, Arkansas, Ole Miss. I mean, that's tough. That is tough.
Yeah.
Well, we played at Florida the year before too. I think the last couple of years have been quote unquote down years for Alabama, and maybe the team as a whole hasn't been as disciplined, and that's kind of been tough when we've gone into
Exactly. Yeah.
these road environments with inexperienced, struggling kind of young team early on in the season as well.
Right. Yeah. That's yeah. But looking at this schedule again, I just I look at you got LSU and A&M at home. It looks like Auburn at home and Mississippi State at home. So your home schedule is actually, really your four. Well, I don't want to say LSU, but A&M is obviously not a. They got talent, but they don't really seem like a contender.
Right.
Mississippi State, they're solid, but they're not going to be a contender. And I think next year is still too early on in the freeze era for them to be much of a contender. So uh, the home games set up fairly nicely for Alabama, but I cannot take my eyes off those at games
Yeah.
and that's if you don't win on the road, especially in league play, you're not going to be set up for success. So, like Joe mentioned earlier, iron sharpens iron, and I think we talked about it last week, Jake, on one of our shows, how 2020 was our favorite season because of the 100% SEC schedule. Then you get to the
Hmm.
playoff and play Notre Dame, and then Ohio State. So that is just that's college football right there. And
Right.
with the college football playoff expanding, obviously you can afford to lose a couple more games probably, especially with a schedule like Alabama's projected there. So you look at that schedule. If Alabama, even if they finish the regular season with 3 losses, I mean in a 12-team playoff, how can you not put them in?
Yeah, especially just hypothetically, you say you go to Oklahoma, you win it, you lose to Georgia, you lose to uh, Tennessee, but you win the rest of them. I mean
Right.
that I still say that win in Oklahoma will carry some weight.
Yeah, and
Well,
it's tough too. We're sitting here. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say it's tough too sitting here looking at this project. Obviously, it's projections, but we're also trying to project. Who's going to be the starting quarterback on these teams. I mean, for Oklahoma, you won't have Dylan Gabriel. Presumably, he'll be gone. But you've got a guy like Jackson Arnold, who's
Right.
supposed to be the next great quarterback. So he'll be there for Mississippi State. I mean, Will Rogers will probably be gone. Tennessee. I mean, you don't really know who. Like the schedule itself is projected, but also we have no idea, especially with the transfer portal and how crazy it was
Right.
in year one, who is going to be under center and who's going to be on the line of scrimmage for any one of these teams.
Right. Yeah, there's so much unknown, and you brought up the transfer portal and how that can really change everything. And it's just so fun to kind of look ahead. And I mean, I would be ecstatic for that to be the schedule. I mean, obviously, I'd be nervous because you're not going to go undefeated with that schedule. I don't care if you got the best team of all time. You're not going undefeated with that schedule. And so it's just going to be a lot of fun, like you said, because there is so much unknown about the the teams on that schedule for next year. You know, there's going to be uncertainty at quarterback, probably uncertainties, you know, at the head coaching positions for certain teams. You never know. I mean, so much can change. I mean, if Oklahoma doesn't have a really good year, they could be looking for a head coach again, you know,
Right.
heading into year one in the SEC. So you just never know how that's going to play out, because yeah, I know it's just 1 year from now, but look how much the game has changed, you know, in the last 12 months, and how much the sport has changed, how much the rosters have changed. There's just so many unknown variables to really have a good gauge on what each of these teams are going to look like in 2024.
Yeah, I agree 100%, Stacy. And one thing about the schedule as a whole for the whole SEC is, you know, when they go to this new format, we're playing either 8 or 9 SEC teams in the future. It's going to give opportunity for teams that haven't seen each other yet. I mean, Georgia has yet to go to Texas A&M and play them at Texas A&M at Kyle Field. So those players have not had, you know, the advantage to experience that atmosphere. And there's several others. I don't think South Carolina has been to Alabama in God knows how long.
Since 2009.
Right. So, you know, it's going to give opportunities for better, you know, teams to play each other who have not recently played in a long time. And I'm actually glad it's actually happening because it's going to be fun. We know SEC is the top dog in football. And honestly, look at all sports. When Oklahoma and Texas move in, it's going to be the walking dog in softball too. Because I mean, truthfully, Oklahoma's fixing to probably win another softball championship, and they're fixing to be moving the SEC where they're going to play even more better competition. So it's just great all around.
Yeah, going back
for sure.
going back to your Georgia point, this year you look at Georgia's schedule, it's a cakewalk. Last year, I guess 2 years ago, up until they played us, they didn't really have much of a challenge. So they are one of the teams that, I mean, it's not necessarily their fault, but hasn't really had much of a challenge in the regular season. And a couple of teams that you wouldn't think would give them a challenge, like last year with Missouri. Missouri almost beat them. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad that they get to play some tougher opponents. And like I said earlier, just the conference as a whole, battling it out is going to be so much fun to watch.
Yeah.
Right, and you know, they made – Georgia had Oklahoma lined up, I believe, for this year for a non-conference game, but I think that the SEC kind of put a stop to that. And, I believe in Georgia saying what do you say here?
Yeah, pretty easy schedule. This year's resort. Which, I mean, you know, it's kind of like Alabama in their glory days. It was so hard to try to get a team with a Power 5 school that was really good to play us because they didn't want to lose that first game against Alabama. I think Georgia's kind of following that schedule as well, where you can't find somebody to play. Now, Oklahoma would have been good until it got, you know, it got busted. But, you know, it's just kind of hard to find somebody to play, you know, right now because they're good. Alabama's good. You know, it's just top-notch football here in the SEC. So I'm excited about it.
Well, yeah, and teams didn't want to do the home and away series with Alabama back in the day, and so they were forced to just play the neutral site games with a bunch of teams, and now they've got a bunch of really good home and away series schedules, and here we're fixing to go to you know, Oklahoma and Texas joining the conference, and there's no more divisions, so it's likely you see Georgia more often, and you know, you obviously play Tennessee every year anyway. It's going to be interesting to see how that all, you know, ends up. But as far as the permanent opponents go, but it's just the way the game is changing. It makes it fun on one hand, but man, do I miss the old days where, you know, it was just the old days. You know, there was no craziness of the transfer portal going on. You know, guys didn't transfer until they graduated. Right. There was no, you know, not that I'm against NIL, but there wasn't these guys going to Miami just because they were going to be making a lot of money. I mean, it just, I don't know. I miss part of it, but you know, times are changing, and you know, I guess you have to progress with the times. So it makes it interesting. It makes it for some good summer conversation like we're having now. But I do miss, part of the good old days.
Yeah, Joe, you got anything you want to add real quick?
I don't. I think Stacy did a good job
Mhm.
summarizing.
Yeah, I think that I'm glad the players are getting paid for their name, image, and likeness because I feel like they deserved it, and and now of course everybody's excited about the new college football game coming out next summer. So you know that might be something to get us through the summer at least. But I feel like it's something that should have happened a long time ago because I mean you go buy a kid's jersey and wear it to the game, but he didn't get any kind of money off of it. Now he is. So it's I'm there's still got to be some kind of rules and technicalities to go along with it that we haven't figured out yet. But that's why Coach Saban has been harping about it so much. Is we don't mind doing it. He don't mind doing it. It's just there's got to be some kind of rules and regulations that is not set up yet. It just can't be a free for all.
Right, and people been talking about how Saban's whining about NIL because he's not going to be able to do well in it. I mean, did they not realize he just signed the number one class in the country the second year that NIL was available, and the first year
Right.
NIL was available, he was second.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike Florio, who I'm assuming you're referencing, got basically
Yes.
dunked on for writing that article by everybody, and he's an
Yeah.
NFL guy, so I don't know. Kind of one of those things where you got to stay in your lane.
Yeah. He needs to stay in the NFL. Yeah, that
Yeah, I
made no
mean,
sense.
but if you're going to write an article like that, you need to be in touch. He was completely out of touch with reality on that article. I mean, like he wasn't even the same galaxy.
Right. That was that was not good at all. I don't know why he wrote that. I guess just for clicks. I guess he got it and
Oh
views.
yeah, I'm sure he got the clicks on that. I mean,
Hmm.
he's probably happy because of the clicks, but man, I mean, I don't know, like that him looked like a fool. I mean, just
Yeah.
speaking candidly.
Yeah, for sure. That was wild.
But
Trying
I don't know. When I saw that article from 247 Sports about the projected schedule for next season, it got me excited because one, football season's 88 days away from today. Kickoff against Middle Tennessee State. It's actually sooner than that because I'm sure there'll be games the week before that. So long until football season, and then you think about next year when Texas and Oklahoma join, how fun that's going to be, and Alabama's already got to play Texas last year and then again this year, so we're already getting kind of a taste of what rivalry
right.
could look like because I think that's going to be. I think Alabama and Oklahoma and Texas will be interesting because all those brands they're huge brands in college football, so that those fans are going to be excited each time they play each other. So I think that's going to be an exciting series between all those schools, and we've already gotten a little bit of a taste from last year and how epic that game was, there in Texas, and I think under the Bryant Denny Stadium, the second week of the season is going to be one of the
Oof.
most electric atmospheres in college football for 2023. So I'm really looking forward to that, and then in 2024, maybe making a trip to Oklahoma, making a trip to Athens, which hasn't been done since what 2015, 2016.
I think so. Yeah. Been a while.
Jake Coker was the quarterback. What? That's the
Yeah,
last
that's
time we played there, right?
2015.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
been a hot minute.
Yeah.
I mean, so that would, I mean, that would be great. I mean, I want to go there and play those guys, and Georgia come to Alabama during the COVID year, so I mean, they come to our place, but it wasn't quite the same as what it would normally be under the circumstances. But making a trip to Georgia, that would be a lot of fun, and obviously Oklahoma. I don't think we've played at Oklahoma since Tyler Watts was the quarterback. So,
Gosh.
Joe, you probably don't even remember that, do you, man?
No, I might not even been alive at that point. What
What,
year
what,
would that have been?
I feel like it might have been
Uh,
02, 03,
yeah.
maybe
Oh, I
01.
was alive at that point, but no chance I remember
All
that.
right, y'all carry on. I've got to look up. I got to look this up.
My first recollection of a quarterback at Alabama was Andrew Zhao because I just remember I forgot who the announcers was, but I just remember him always saying Andrew Zhao about to pass.
Now, I
And
will say this, and I'm probably outing myself that I didn't become a Bama fan until I like committed. I decided to go to school, so I get made fun of a lot for that. But
Hey,
I've always been a fan of them kind of from the distance and respected what they've done. And so when I
Okay.
decided to go to, oh, you got it?
Yeah, I got it. All right. And
Okay.
I was that to Alabama went to Oklahoma and got beat 37-27, and then in '03, they come to Tuscaloosa and beat us 20-13. So
oh,
yeah,
Damn.
so crazy.
yeah.
So it's been
I've,
it's been 20 years since
yeah.
we've played them twice at neutral sites, for bowl games and stuff like that since then. But as far as a home and away, it's been 20 years. Which to me,
And,
when you got two brands like Alabama and Oklahoma, they need to play more than that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And you're talking about Oklahoma struggles here recently. And once they get in the SEC, the recruiting will probably get a little bit better because, I mean, every kid wants
Yeah.
to play good football. It all depends on how Will Venables does as a head coach. Is he head coach material or is he just a defense coordinator? We know a lot about, head coaches or defense coordinators who become head coaches, but they just way out of their element, like Will Muschamp. I mean, he's a great defensive mind, but as a head coach, he just didn't really have it, So he may fall in that category. I guess this would be a deciding year for him.
I was just going to say with Venables, I think it's tough because, especially in a place like Oklahoma, you got your Oklahomas, your Texases, your Miami's, places where they're used to having phenomenal football teams. The pressure from the fans and the boosters can kind of be a lot, but at least from the recruiting side of things, in year two, they've done a great job recruiting. I know they flipped a kid from Oregon, a safety. I think Peyton Bone is his name, one of the top players in the country. And I touched on Jackson Arnold earlier, getting him to commit there as I think the top player in like the Elite 11 for quarterback. So the recruiting side of things, I think they're doing well. But I think after, I would say, you kind of give it 3 years, it would be the mark for me. And I think coaches too, it's easier. I mean, we saw it with Deion Sanders. It's easier with the transfer portal to basically say, these are the guys I want. And you can basically get a whole new team in there in just one off season. So pressure, I guess, is quote unquote on for Brent Venables at Oklahoma. But I do think that they'll be a lot better than they were last year. I mean, they can't get much worse.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, this really is. This is a defining year, not only for Venables, but really for Oklahoma, because you don't want to enter the SEC in either A, your coach is on a severe hot seat, or B, you got a brand new coach coming in. So, like, they better be good. You know what I mean? They better be good, because you don't want to come to the SEC, coach on the hot seat, or a brand new coach, when you're joining this conference. So it's going to be it's a big year for Oklahoma, and I'm anxious to see kind of how they do and what Venables does in his second year. And like you mentioned, Joe, he's recruited well. He's recruited good enough to compete, especially in the Big 12. There's no reason Texas and Oklahoma should not be right up there. I know TCU made the playoff last year, but I just don't see them, making quite the advancement that they did this past season. Kansas State will probably be, pretty solid once again there in the Big 12. So I think Oklahoma and Texas have a real shot of being the two best teams in that conference this year, simply from a roster standpoint. But just never know. College football is a weird game.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I got a question for you fellas real quick. Once we move to either the 8 or 9 game SEC schedule, is there a chance at all that Vandy ever hits 6 wins?
Ooh.
I don't think so, but
I don't.
That's a hard.
Crazier things have happened. I know a couple
It
years
has.
ago, Arkansas was projected to win like 3 or 4 games, and I think it was the first year with Sam Pittman, or it might have been the second. And I think they won like 6 or 7. So you never really know. Of course, I will say, Vanderbilt hasn't really had a history, I don't even know, in my lifetime of being, a great team. But crazier things have happened. So maybe they attacked the transfer portal. They were feisty last year, though. They weren't anything special, but I'll say no right now, but I know that crazier things have happened for sure.
Yeah, I would say this. I'm not ever going to say never,
Right.
but the chances of that happening are so slim. I mean, it's already been so tough for them, and now, if they add another game,
Oh,
I mean,
man.
what
Yeah.
that game's either going to be. I mean, they already play Georgia every year, and obviously, I say you don't know what the schedule's going to look like once all this changes, and going first. And by the way, I'm so glad we're going away from divisions.
Yes, I agree 100%.
Because last year it would have been Tennessee and Georgia in the SEC championship game, and I don't think there was any doubt. Even and I wish Hooker would have been healthy. Not that it would have mattered. Georgia still would have won, but I just feel like when both those teams were healthy, that they were probably the two best teams in the league. I don't think it was LSU, and I think Alabama was right there by the end of it. I mean, you saw what they did to Kansas State.
Right.
In the Sugar Bowl. So, but I don't know. I'm a fan of no divisions. How do y'all guys feel about that?
Yeah, I'm 100% behind it. I think so to do. I always felt like the two best teams, and honestly, the last couple of years, Alabama and Georgia really have been the two best teams in the conference. But last year, Alabama really had some question marks and wasn't playing up to their standard. So they was like just a step below Tennessee and Georgia, I believe. So I really think that would have been a fun SEC championship game if those two played again. And like you said, Stacey, if a healthy Hooker, it really didn't do much against them in the first game, but you never know it happened.
But and look, I hate to even go back to last year, but they played at Georgia. I mean,
Right.
you don't know about a neutral site game. That in the same way with Alabama and Tennessee and Alabama and LSU, if those games
Right.
are played in Tuscaloosa, they may be totally different.
That could be.
So,
Absolutely.
I think that matters. I think where the game's played at obviously matters. Home field advantage is a thing. And did y'all see where people talked about how Georgia's not a good home field advantage?
Yeah.
Like-
What?
Yeah, I did see that. I think
Yeah,
with the
90,000 people barking like dogs is not a good home field advantage.
I think the no divisions thing too goes beyond the SEC too. I know as somebody who is a Penn State fan as well, having two bros that graduated from there. I mean, you look at the Big Ten, you've got Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State all in the East, and then you've got the West is Purdue, Illinois, Iowa, like just a bunch of teams that
Are no
many
good.
years ago
Yeah.
were solid, but have not been good in a while. So I know the Big Ten as well is talking about just dissolving the East and the West into one division.
That'd be
So
great.
that's the first thing that came to mind was just the fact that Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State, three powerhouse teams, having to fight it out to. I mean, whichever one of those teams comes in second would beat the hell out of any of the West teams and be the champion there. So
Which one is Wisconsin in?
Wisconsin is in the West. So the West is Purdue, Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Northwestern.
So literally, Wisconsin is like the only team that would even be remotely that have the only chance to beat any of those teams in a conference championship game.
Yeah, Purdue won
year.
the division. Purdue won the division last year at 6-3, and then obviously in the East you've got Michigan 9-0, 8-1 Ohio State, and Penn State in third at 7-2. What a one that was. So.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Abolish divisions in all conferences.
I agree.
I think that's the way it needs to be, and to me, I think the way college football needs to kind of obviously the game's going to keep changing and evolving, and I think eventually, this is just my opinion, what needs to happen. We're fixing to wrap the show up. Is get away from divisions and maybe keep conferences if that's what you want to call them, but you play in your region, like you play against teams in your region.
Right.
So, and if you play a 12-game schedule, like you play a 12-game schedule, but only against teams in your region.
Mm-hmm.
And then each region has a regional championship. The top two teams from that region play each other, and then they all go and play. The winners of those play in a playoff.
Yeah.
And so the teams out west have it's part of a region. Then you have the Midwest. Then you have the Southwest. You have the Southeast, and the teams from each of those regions of the country get together for a playoff. The champions of those regions get together for a playoff, because I think it's obvious that right now the truth is you could just not even play the 2023 season, have a 12-team or a 4-team playoff, and if you said the 4 teams are, well, let's just do this. Let's say you got to pick. You give college football fans a list of teams right now before the season started. You said you got Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, and USC. 4 of those teams, of those 6 teams, are going to be your 4 teams in the playoff. Would you say that there's a chance anybody besides 4 of those 6 teams would be in the playoff? Think about it. Who else out of those in the country would you say had a chance to make the playoff?
That's a good point. I can't think of anybody else.
Like maybe, did I say USC? I don't even know if I did.
You did.
Did I? Okay.
Yeah.
Oregon.
Yeah.
I mean,
maybe?
so like there's only a handful of teams that are playoff worthy, and this I could go on how the 12-team playoff is a joke because of that reason. I cannot think of one single year where there was 12 teams worthy of being crowned a national champion.
Yeah, you're right. We talked about that 100 times, Stacey, about, there's usually just 4 teams that are national championship worthy. Just let them all play and then crown your champion.
Because
Yeah,
my argument for that is, and just so you can, this kind of will prove that I'm not being completely biased, but I really think that if you would have asked Kirby Smart before the playoff started last year, give me the 2 teams you hope you don't have to play in the playoff, I guarantee you, without a shadow of doubt, it would have been Ohio State and Alabama.
Right. 100%.
And Alabama didn't make it in. You know why? Because they didn't deserve to make it in, because they lost 2 games in the season.
Mm-hmm.
But my point is that, man, you need to earn your way in there. Don't just give people a shot to have a shot.
Right.
What I think it's this is where I'm going to disagree. College football is the only sport where the playoff is, obviously it's expanding, is 4 teams, and I don't think it's fair. I mean, we can sit here and talk about who's going to win, but at the end of the day, you play the games on the field. You don't play them on paper. And we saw that with nobody would have thought TCU would have gotten in the playoffs, and then nobody would have thought they would have beaten Michigan, and they did that. Ultimately, they got trampled in the championship game. But the same thing goes with Ohio State. Everybody just assumed after they got the brakes beaten off them by Michigan that they were going to get the brakes beaten off them by Georgia, and they put up a fight and almost won the game. I mean, lost it on a field goal, but I think, like I said, we can sit here and we can talk about who should be in and the fairness and earning our way, but that's why we play the games on the field. And I mean, basketball, I don't want to take it to basketball because it's obviously way different. There's a lot more luck that goes into that. But with March Madness, I think I'm a fan of just expanding the playoffs. I mean, I wouldn't take it past 12, but I think 12 is a good way. Obviously, you're sitting there with the money thing. It's all about the money, but I've always been a fan of expanding it. And even if it's the same teams, I mean, at least we know it's going to be the same teams. Maybe every once in a while you'll get a new team in there, but
no, what will happen is what happened in the national championship game. I mean, that's what's going to happen.
But still, I mean, you can't. It's hard to argue. I mean, and I was one of the people saying that TCU shouldn't have been in it, Michigan, everybody thought Michigan was great and they lost. So
I didn't think Michigan was great because every time Michigan gets in a big game against a team that has any kind of a breath of life in them, they get beat. I mean, they've just now started beating Ohio State.
Right.
I mean, so like I never once thought Michigan was a threat to win a national championship.
I mean, what is old? Who's their coach? Oh, goofball.
Harbaugh.
Harbaugh. Yeah. I mean, he's like 2-7 or something like that against Ohio State now. Maybe 1-7 or 1-8, something like that.
Yeah, he's won 2. He's won the last 2, but up until then, he'd never beaten them. So
Right.
I mean, and he gets in the playoffs and they choke.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, another thing that comes to mind too is USC was one of those teams that was teetering on the edge of being in the playoffs. And Tulane, I think, had won their conference, and in the 12-team model that we're going to have, they would have been in the playoffs, and they beat USC, and nobody would have thought that would happen. This year was definitely a strange year as far as like teams that were supposed to win not winning, and I think that kind of proves overall that it's possible. You know, it might not happen every single year, but the possibility is always going to be there. But I do understand what you're saying too. Most of the time,
My point is you shouldn't just expand it for the purpose of having more games.
Right.
And because what's the point of even having a regular season like we've just talked about, where and Tulane is playing a bunch of nobodies all year long, but just because they win their conference, they get in because it's a 12-team playoff and half the freaking FBS teams get in. I mean, what's the point? I mean, why not just do away with conferences overall and teams? There's no structure whatsoever. You can schedule whoever you want to schedule, and Alabama plays Tulane, Southern Miss, Southwest Missouri State, and they teams like that over and over again, and they go undefeated every single year and they get in. I mean, what's the point? If it was everybody had such a level playing field or a level schedule, or the schedules were at least close to similar, then I can see expanding. But there's nowhere even close. USC. I mean, USC couldn't beat Utah. They had 2 chances to beat Utah and couldn't beat them.
Right.
You know what that tells me? Florida beat Utah.
Well, I mean,
so that tells me that USC is probably. I mean, they got a great quarterback and a great receiver, and they got a head coach who's a really good offensive mind who has never once fielded a defense on for his team. I mean, Alabama got up on Oklahoma when they had the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback in Kyler Murray, 28-0, like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just, it's not, and I know it sounds like I'm being like an SEC homer, but what does the SEC teams do to I mean, look what Alabama did to Ohio State a couple of years with Justin Fields at quarterback.
Right.
I mean, they were out there like it was nothing. They went through Ohio State like Saban would say, like shit through a tin horn.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that year too, kind of the fact that they were playing Clemson and everybody thought they were going to get the shit beat out of them by Clemson, and they ended up. Justin Fields won that game, I think, with like 2 broken ribs. I don't know. I've
okay, but at the end of the day, did the end result change?
No, but you can't just assume because something's happened before that it's going to happen continuously every single year.
Well, I mean, and
the transfer portal too. I think. I mean, just changing teams. Everything goes out the window in my mind. With college football is in the process of changing, and it's going to continue to change even more.
When somebody not named Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Ohio State, and I guess I need to throw Clemson in there because they've won a couple of titles lately, wins a national championship, I mean, maybe I can see it, but I mean,
I think we're underestimating too how hard it is. We're talking about teams being in the playoffs. How hard it is to go from being in the playoffs to being in the national championship to even winning the national championship is so challenging. Alabama is we've been spoiled with Alabama, but like it's so hard to even win your conference. I mean, it's just the process is so daunting and challenging too.
Well, I mean, it's not for USC, and they couldn't beat. I mean, Utah is their think about that. Utah is their biggest challenge, in that. I mean, maybe Oregon.
Yeah.
Maybe
It's
Oregon.
hard too with the conferences because not. I mean, we've talked about it.
That's
tonight.
my point. Not all conferences
are crazy.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's my biggest point. Like, I mean, if the conferences were on a level playing field, then yeah, I mean, if there was Alabama's and Georgia's in every single conference, then yes, I would want a 12-team playoff. But there's not. I mean,
if chalk's going to be chalk as far as the playoffs, then I don't understand how it can hurt like the teams. Like in my mind, if those teams are going to win, they're going to win. So like it doesn't matter if the game's played or not. And if they're going to lose, then we're wrong and they lose. So I don't know. I just don't see how it can be a bad thing. I feel like it can only add viewership and only benefit the teams. It's not going to hurt anybody really.
Well, real quick.
Yeah, no, you're right on that. But like, my whole point is like, when is enough enough? Like, it used to be enough for.
It is a slippery slope. Yeah, that's.
I mean,
I would stop
because
at 12,
it used to be enough for people just to vote for a national championship, and then we're like, well, that's not right. So we went to a computer, which is completely not random, but completely unbiased, and then we're like, oh, well, that's not good enough. So then we go to a 4-team playoff. Well, that's not good enough. Well, now we're going to a 12-team playoff. What happens when that's not enough? I mean, when is enough enough? And that's and people are going to say, well, that's never going to happen. Okay, 15 years ago, people would have said college football would have never had a playoff, and here we are going from 4 to 12 in a matter of what, less than a decade?
Yeah, and I definitely, obviously, we're on different sides as far as expansion, but I agree with you that it is a very slippery slope. 12 teams is perfect for me. I don't want a team more, but as far as it keeps going back to that money, if they can slide a couple more teams in there.
No, I understand. I completely understand the reasoning behind it. But what the regular season in college football, which used to be what separated the game of college football from everything else as far in the sports world, was the fact that the saying every game matters, that was legitimate in college football. That is no longer legitimate. And when you go to 12 teams, every game you can lose. You go to a 12-team playoff and you play a schedule like Alabama's projected to play in 2024. You lose 3 of those games and they're pretty close games. Who cares? You're going to get in.
But
who cares? Regular season didn't matter.
Right.
But also the way it is now, if you're in Alabama and you lose 2 games by a combined 4 points on the road to it was Tennessee and I don't know why LSU, then you're basically out of the playoffs just like that. So I think there should be a little bit of wiggle room. I don't think you should be able to lose like 4 or 5 games and get in. But if you're one of these teams like Alabama and you're playing a tough schedule, I mean, also the fact these are college kids, right? So they got all this other stuff going on in their lives. I don't think it's fair to be like, oh, you're Alabama, you play a hard-ass schedule, you lose 2 games, and you're basically, out of it. And going back to what I said earlier, college football is the only sport where you slip up twice and you're done, essentially, which I don't think that's fair at all.
Well, this is why, Jake, I'll let you talk in just a second. I have one more point to make.
By the way, I love this discussion, too. This is I love this.
And my other point is, if they're going to do the 12 best teams, then I'm here for it. Not here for it. No, I'll be okay with it. But if they're going to be doing automatic bids for conference champions and all this stuff, I mean, I don't care. I mean, it's all it's going to do is piss me off, because I mean, Utah won the Pac-12, right? Am I right on that?
Yeah, because they beat USC in the championship game.
Isn't the term
Florida beat Utah. Florida sucks.
But saying that you want the best teams, the word "best" is so subjective, though. If you're
It's not. It's not.
If you're a team though and you win your conference, doesn't that make you the best team in that conference? So aren't you the best?
Yeah,
team?
but okay. This is my argument. If I have a wrestling competition with a bunch of 6-year-olds and I win it, does that make me worthy of going to the arm wrestling championship in the world?
No, beating 6-year-olds.
I mean, I see what you're saying. I don't know. I think a lot of it's subjective, and a lot of it is kind of like media talking heads.
This to me,
Alabama plays Southern Miss, they're going to beat the crap out of them. But I mean, Alabama plays Tulane. You know, they're
beating the crap out of Tulane.
Right.
They're beating the crap out of Tulane like they beat the crap out of Cincinnati. I mean, it's just. I
think the end result, like, just because you get there and you lose doesn't mean you shouldn't have been there in the first place. Especially when you're playing these juggernaut teams that have way better recruits. Cincinnati earned being in the playoff that year. They might not have been able to beat Alabama, but what Luke Fickell did with, like, I don't think they had a single 5-star on their team. Even Sauce Gardner, I don't think was a 5-star. I mean, you can't take any like that away from them, in my mind.
All right. Well, here's my thing. Go ahead, Stacey. We need to
No, go ahead.
I just want to say about the 12-team playoff thing. I think it was 2020 when it was all SEC schedule, but there were still a few conferences playing. Like, we had Coastal Carolina, the number 12 team that year, and if we had a 12-team playoff, Alabama was the number 1 seed. If they would have went that route, we would have played Coastal Carolina the very first game of this, in the playoffs. That is a snooze fest because how many times is Coastal Carolina going to beat Alabama? 0 out of 100 times.
And let me add this on there. You know who's excited about that game? Coastal Carolina, and that's it. The rest of the country is going to look at that game and say,
"Yeah,
what else is on TV?"
Yeah,
they can say that people will watch that. Nobody's going to watch that.
No,
I mean,
Coastal Carolina
season games that are like that too.
Yeah, but so that's what I want to get away with. I want to play a tough regular season schedule and then not have to play Coastal Carolina because they won their conference in the playoff.
Right, exactly.
But if, like I said earlier, chalk will be chalk, and Alabama win that game, then it doesn't hurt anybody. It's a
okay. Hey,
game.
Okay, it doesn't hurt anybody unless Alabama's starting quarterback gets hurt.
Right.
Playing Coastal Carolina, so that's
he could get hurt any week walking down the street.
Okay. Do you want him to get hurt against Coastal Carolina in a 1 versus 12 matchup, or do you want him to? I mean, I just when is enough, and how it just and I think there is a way to objectively reach who the best teams are.
Right.
I think there is, and I think you can use. This is a small part of it, but you can use history because history, more oftentimes than not, repeats itself. You can use their roster, what that roster looks like. You can use what that coach has done. But the best way to do it, and they'll never do this, is instead of having a stupid committee of people who have their own agenda, put the best of the best college football head coaches in a room together, and you make them watch the tape, and they tell you who the best teams are.
Right.
And you know what?
Yeah, I agree with that.
You know what? They'd be 99 times out of 100, especially over the last decade. It's going to be Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State. So I think there's an objective way to find who the best teams are without allowing everybody and their mama into a playoff just so it makes everybody feel good because they won their conference. Whoop-de-doo.
Right. Yeah, the SWAC is going to be playing Alabama the first game. Whoever comes out the SWAC. Well, the SWAC is in the Mountain West.
I mean,
it's just Power 5 champions, right? That's automatic bid.
Yeah, the mighty Utah Utes who couldn't beat Florida.
Yeah, that's embarrassing. If I was you,
and look, I know
when it's the first game of the year, though,
and I know in a one game scenario, I mean, anything can happen, but I don't think you can base a big decision like this, like expansion and stuff like that, off of something that has, probably less than a 1% chance of happening. You have to go with what is not a sure thing, but as close to a sure thing as you can get, because I'm not about I don't like participation trophies. Just because you win some measly conference, you get in. I don't know. I can tell that I'm probably not in the majority on this, but uh, before we go, I think Jake's got something else he wants to add, because
Yeah,
I got to
this
get out
is
of here.
yeah, this is totally outside of the football talk, but I just wanted to say that about 3 or 4 hours ago, the Bleacher Report had put out an article that my Charlotte Hornets were leaning towards Brandon Miller at number 2. So please hit that freaking hammer on Brandon Miller, Charlotte. You would change your whole franchise with this player, because I know Wemby's on the board, but I'm telling you, I believe in the futures coming up, he's going to be the best player that comes out of this draft.
Also,
Well, and
too,
how many?
you'd have Bryce Young on the
Yes,
Panthers in
right.
Charlotte, and then you'd
Yeah,
have
who's ready
Brandon
to move
Miller.
to Charlotte?
Man,
My parents live there right now. Go
Oh,
catch a couple
nice.
games, maybe.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah, hey, I'm with you. Like, obviously, the whatever his name is like a unicorn, but those guys
Well, they,
don't
they
make it in
won't
the
be able to
league.
get him.
Yeah,
He'll
but
go
but those
number
guys
one.
don't make it in the league. I mean, look at
no.
Kristaps Porzingis. His nickname was the Unicorn.
Mhm,
Those guys just don't make it. They're too fragile.
mhm,
And I hope he does. I hope he's a great player. I don't have nothing
yeah.
against him. I'm just when it comes to once again going back to history, historically, guys that are 7'5" and weigh 165 pounds soaking wet don't make it in the NBA very long.
I mean,
I
Greg
mean, shoot,
Oden.
Chet Holmgren got hurt before the season even started.
Yeah, and Greg Odom, he had knee injuries, and I think he's a little bit bigger, but still, he was like 7 foot tall, and but their knees just give out real quick. But Brandon Miller,
Anyways,
I believe is going to be the best player that comes out of this draft, and Charlotte needs a life in that franchise. I mean, they have it. They have an opportunity right here to put life back in that franchise.
no doubt that'd be a big time get for them.
It
I
would
hope they
be.
draft him.
Him and Lonzo, my gosh, or Lamo, I meant, my gosh, that would be a tandem.
All right, are you through with your Charlotte Hornets
Yes,
speak
I am.
talk?
I'll talk some more about it tomorrow night on SEC After Dark.
All right. All right, well, that's going to wrap it up, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you're not already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell notification so you don't miss any of our episodes here at Tide Talk Live. Make sure you smash the like button on this video. Share it with your Facebook friends, Twitter, just wherever you're at on social media. So get the word out about Tide Talk Live. Been a lot of fun discussing the potential of what the 2024 schedule could look like for Alabama, and then also the pros and cons of expansion in the college football playoffs. So a lot of great discussion. This is something we need to continue on down the road this summer,
Yeah.
kind of debating amongst ourselves. But that's going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for watching. For Stacey Blackwood, Jake Thomas, and Joel Will, this has been Tide Talk Live. And until next time, roll Tide.
Roll Tide.